I'm Nick, I'm an addict.
Hi, Nick.
It's, you said before, you said Nick looks a bit cold or a bit like, you know, a bit kind of, and I felt a bit like that in here. And I think reading the step before I came, and this word humility that keeps coming up. And I was thinking, I've done 3 step 7s with 3 different sponsors. You know, I went through a treatment centre and we did a step 5 there. And then my first sponsor, Elmer, we went through the steps. And then another guy, Martin, who lives in Brighton, took me through the steps again in a more orthodox way, in a way. And then my current sponsor, who I've been with for like 25 years, something like that. It is about that, yeah, 20 years. I remember going to the Krishna restaurant, and then we went into Soho Square and did a prayer together and letting go of these. And the entirely ready bit before that, the previous step, it was as though all my defects came out to play. You know, I had a fight on the street, things like that. There were all these sort of things that seemed to happen. And reading it today, because you drift from this stuff, you know, and sort of reading it today, there was part of me felt almost embarrassed the way I've drifted from some of those things and the way those defects or the shortcomings manifest in my life today. And I think that the word humility is good because I'm full of arrogance and grandiosity and all those things. Do you know what I mean? And judgmentalness and resentments and all those things. I still keep a resentment list. You know, I don't often add to it, but every now and again I do. And it works, you know. And it's always that bit where I move from what they did, who they were, how I felt about it, murderous rage, abandonment, all the usual things. And then, okay, where does it find a purchase with me? You know, I remember Martin saying this in Brighton. He said it's usually, with people like us, it's usually first the pride, you know, I've been made to look foolish, you know, and then there's the arrogance, don't they know who I am? And then the self-pity, I'm an addict, you know, I've suffered, I've had a hard life, and why don't people, you know? And that kind of trio of those defects, it's a bit like, when I was in treatment, I did a step 4 and 5, they bust somebody in to hear the step 5, He was actually, when I was starting to reveal like the darker bits of my step 5, he was going, oh, we don't need to go into that, you know. He was like, you don't need to go into it. And, but here's the rub is that it worked, you know what I mean? I stayed clean and all the rest of it. And I think that's the measure. It's like the prayer, the meditation, the rest of it. I realised early on, or somebody sort of said to me, that it's this thing about not being too hard on ourselves. Sometimes, I mean, normally I have a cold shower in the morning, I pray in the shower, I do my stuff, and I haven't done that today, and that's okay, you know, occasionally I don't do it, and it's realising I can be on the tube or something, and I can just do that quick serenity prayer, or I can just take a breath, relax, release, you know, and just let that stuff fall off. And the main thing about this, which it stresses in the step, is this business that we're not alone, you know, that I'm looked after. Because that's the bit I just went, we had our annual general meeting at this therapy organisation where I trained, and it's a bit like, it's what I always say about this place, I haven't found what I found in these rooms anywhere else. You know, everybody aspires to it. The Labour Party probably aspire to this kind of, you know, the fierce democracy of this, but they don't quite hack it, because there's something about this room when I come in here, I know you've all suffered. You know, whatever the details of your journey, it's sort of, it's a bit like, what is it, Hendrix, you know, but you and I, we've been through that, you know, this is not our fate, it's that realisation that everybody in the room has suffered, and I kind of don't have to be polite, I don't have to win people over, or all that sort of stuff that's my natural inclination is to be liked, is to, you know, is to charm people, or you know, be funny and all that sort of stuff. And it's been, in a way, you could say I've had a hard 15 years. My wife was diagnosed with leukemia in 2010. She had a stem cell transplant. It worked for 5 years. The leukemia came back in 2017. She's been in intensive care. She's had various side things. And I've spent a lot of time in intensive care, sitting on a, you know, in some pristine environment, sitting on a plastic seat, where you're just absolutely powerless. You know, my wife sort of almost like some tentacle beast with tubes going into everywhere. She's delirious. So, and that loneliness of the person that you're most close to, they're preoccupied with surviving, and they're not there, and sitting in those sort of environments. It's been hard, but the irony of it is it's sort of been bliss as well, you know, sort of witnessing this. And then, you know, people always say, well, what about you? How are you managing it? Because you're sort of a spectator, but it's almost like you'd rather be in a fight than be watching a, well, not necessarily, but you know what I mean? It's we're kind of quite good at action, of getting in there and drama and all that. But that other bleak desert that occurs in those sorts of situations, I find very difficult. And in December, I went for this annual Hep C thing, and the nurse said to me, have you ever been diagnosed with atrial fibrillation? When she did my basic stuff, and I said no, and she said, oh, it's just some anomaly there. So I mentioned it to my GP in a routine visit, and she said, well, let's just do a routine cardiogram. So she sent me to the Homerton to have this thing done, and I was fine. I went in there, the guy did the thing, and he said, could you just wait a minute? I just want to show this to the doctor. And he went off. And you know that thing where you want to get, it was Christmas, it wasn't Christmas Eve, it was the day before Christmas Eve, so it was December the 23rd, I think. And the doctor was on the rounds, and I was waiting, and I was already getting into that thing, well, listen, I'm fucking off, if you know, and all that. But part of me thought, if I go, I'll be haunted by whatever, you know, so I need to know. And the doctor came in, and I started saying to her, look, what, you know, why are you keeping me here? And she said, because you're having a heart attack, or you've had a heart attack very recently, because I was producing some enzyme, which is a sign of damage to the arteries. So I was in all over Christmas. I was wide up. I didn't say I feel fine, but I didn't feel like I was having a heart attack. You know, it was They wouldn't discharge me, because they said, if we discharge you, we won't be able to get a scan, because it's Christmas and all the rest of it, and everybody's off and all that. You'll be on a waiting list for months. So I went for the scan. A couple of my arteries in the left ventricle was collapsing, wasn't inflating properly in my heart. And so they put me on these first heart medications. But I remember there was an Italian consultant. You know, you're in that thing where you're really vulnerable. And this woman came along, and she said, the doctor with us, she said, don't worry about him, he's just a middle-class Englishman, you know. She just dismissed him, you know. She said, I'm the important one. And she said to me, you're not going to die, which always helps. And she said, I'm going to reshape your heart, you know, with medication and all the rest of it. But the interesting, since then, I've felt better than I've ever felt. Not just with the meds, I've been exercising. And it was also, it's slowly dawned on me, I've had this stuff for years and years. 20 years ago, I did the Warriors, the Mankind Project. And there was part of it where you're running the gauntlet of all these guys, you know, everyone's, oh, it's full on, you know. And I passed out. Whenever I got where I was wrestling with somebody, when it got to that certain point, everything just, it was like when the main gasket's gone in the car, you know, every time you got above a certain revs, the car just goes, phew. I was like that, you know, and so it's been around. I've had this stuff for a long time. And the usual, because I said to the consultants, I said, look, I was injecting Diconol however many years ago, 50 years ago, and it's a suspension, it's not a solution, so I've probably got loads of chalk, and, you know, I've injected loads of shite over the years, so it might be a result of that. And then, you know, of course, my doctor sees this on the thing, the serious drug abuser, and I said, no, hang on, it's 50 years ago, there's a slight, you know, there's half a century since I've done that, but maybe it's the consequences of those days, you know. I mean, even I don't talk about it much nowadays because it always feels like a story. But near the end, we were just talking about speed before. Near the end of my using, it was like I dropped, you know, blueies and things like that in the 60s, and got, you know, stayed up all night and all that. But after those long methadone years and using, you know, street heroin and all that, I kind of rediscovered speed. There was a guy down here. There was a woodworking shop on Upper Street. He used to sell tools, woodworking tools, and the guy there was, I'm going to say infamous. He was famous, you know, for selling speed. We used to go to his house and taking these huge quantities of speed, and it was like rediscovering my youth, you know, except I looked like a madman on the street, you know, with this little, a Walkman with sellotape on it. All right, man, I was doing speed's fucking great, you know. And that was the end of my youth. It's not attractive in a young man, but in like a middle-aged man, you know, it's like, all right, that's how you do, yeah. It's you recoil from it. So I've, you know, done loads of that stuff, but this is the part of the reason I'm mentioning it. I always stumble on what I'm going to say as I'm saying it, so you bear with me, the impressionistic aspect of it. I've had greater highs in recovery than I ever had when I was using. We went surfing for a while, went to Cornwall, and it was that thing about humility. I was in the sea, I hired a board, I hired a wetsuit. The guy with me hired a wetsuit and he put it on the wrong way around, and someone said to him, and he burst into tears, he was just that embarrassed. He went, "Oh, I'm not doing it," you know, like that. But I was in the sea, and I was trying to get on this board, and it was just impossible, you know, even to kind of lie on it, and I was struggling in the waves. And the difference was, and around me, you know, everybody else had braided hair and was like tanned and etched, and, you know, their bodies, and huffed and puffed, and everyone was beautiful. And I was like this old man struggling with a piece of driftwood, you know, in the sea. And I persevered, and one of them came over and said, "Yeah, look, I'll show you." And it was that thing about people helping me, and eventually I stood up for a little bit, which was an amazing feat. I stood up, you know, for like 3 feet or something, but I remember thinking at that time, one time that the rain was pounding down on the sea was leaden, you know, that kind of leaden, ominous, menacing, where you can start to see the waves build, and you think, oh, hey, here we go, you know, as you're waiting, should I get this one, and all that. And I thought, fucking hell, there's nothing like this, you know, feeling absolutely alive and feeling this rain pounding down on me, and actually feeling the success of getting the momentum of the wave and coming in. And I don't remember experiencing that when I was using. You know, I mean, it's not the same as imagining it in a basement somewhere. You know, when we first came to London years ago, we went to a club called the Temple and bought Black Bombers. You know that thing when you're in this place and you think, we've arrived in London, this is fantastic. There was some guy talking to me and he had a picture of Jesus. He was showing me this picture of Jesus that seemed to be radiant, you know, and it's the majesty of this picture. And I was thinking, this guy's great. He's obviously, he's a shaman, you know, he's got this picture, and the people around me, aren't these wonderful? And how have I arrived in this paradise? When the bombers wore off about 3 o'clock in the morning, you suddenly look around you, the room stinks, you know, of like cities and piss and uric acid and all that. The guy's dead spotty who's pushing this picture he's torn out of a magazine at me. And I think this is... But that kind of massive come down. Well, I think the thing about this recovery lark is I haven't really experienced that come down in here. It sustains, you know, on a kind of a milder level, and it doesn't wear off, which is good. So yeah, it didn't, my shortcomings weren't removed, but they were certainly acknowledged and lessened. And I think it's this bit about speaking, you know, about that kind of freedom of speech and saying, yeah, I do have this stuff. As I say, I was at this annual general meeting the other day. I immediately hate all the other therapists. Most of them are a bit div and a bit, you know, and they're not that. Whereas my way of working often with people is getting them on their feet and doing what I did in the Warriors, what I've done with sponsors here, where we have that honesty, open-mindedness and willingness, where we can say very difficult things to each other with permission, you know, in the right environment. So it's been, it's just been a strange journey, and I still feel that, I was thinking about it a lot coming down here on the bus, and just the freedom of it. I went to Waterstones and I was looking at the books, and it's been a long journey, you know. It's been a long time. It's September the 17th, 88, I got clean. That was my first day clean. I was 37. I'm 74 now. And there were moments after the hard thing, part of me thought it was a result, you know, because I thought, well, I'll die soon, you know, so I've escaped unscathed, you know, I've managed to, you know, it's an end of things. I don't feel like that now, you know. I enjoy my work, I see people, I only see a few people who I like to see, you know, it's enjoyable. The people I see are willing, they want to come along and they want a serious conversation, you know, which is exciting. And I go out walking, you know, with the dog or whatever. But it's, my wife said to me today, it was almost a revolutionary statement from her. She went to I took her this morning to the dentist. Then we went to get her hair done afterwards. She made an appointment, and I picked her up, and she said, as she was coming up the steps, she said, it's peculiar. She said, I'm having this radical transformation. She said, I've started to actually feel happy, you know, and which is very unusual, you know. But it's, I thought, I felt like that for a while, you know. And I've had all those mad moments like the surfing and the rest of it. And, you know, early recovery, I've bored people with it before. I had a long affair. And it says something about me and this person would sit down, we'd do the daily readings, we'd go to lots of meetings, we were meditating together, we were doing all this. But I was having an affair, you know what I mean? I never told anyone, you know. So it's amazing how we can sustain the other. Somebody said everybody has a public life, a private life, and a secret life. And I think it's that secret life that this challenges. We used to do it sometimes when we do a group where you'd say, okay, here's the exercise. Tell the person next to you something about you don't want them to know, you know. And it could be I had a wank this morning or whatever it is. But the thing that most conjures shame, you know, the thing that you're hiding away beneath the persona and the eloquence and all the rest of it. And obviously I had that, you know, even when I was using, I always had that ability to charm people. You know, I'd be like around some gangster's house, and I'd be that guy in the corner, you know, when people were scoring and all that. And as they went out the door, I'd say, I don't really trust that guy, you know. Are you sure he's all right and things like that? You couldn't lay half a bag on me, or you know. But I was never sort of. Other people would do it by physical force or violence, but I was one of those insidious, demonic characters who was always there. It's very nice. Do you want anything from the shops? Oh, you know. Waiting for the dealer to come back. I mean, I've said it loads of times. I'm waiting for the dealer to come back, and I distinctly remember that where you've been waiting what feels like a millennium. You know, he went out 2 days ago, and you're cursing him and the fucking selfish bastard, he's stoned somewhere, you know. And you hear the key in the door, and suddenly, you know, everybody's like meerkats, everyone's sort of alert, and he comes, oh, we were worried about you, man, you know. I've been out to look for you a couple of times. Are you all right? There's a famous, there's a famous tale in the Fellowship. There was a guy, and this is from many years ago, so, you know, there was a guy called Sebastian who had one leg in the Fellowship, and he lost his leg. He went to score, right? He was dealing. This is in Brighton or Hove or somewhere like that. On his way back, he was hit by an Atlantean bus as he rushed across the road, and ended up with, you know, like there was a crane there and a big crowd of people, and he was under the bus, and they were trying to get the bus off him. And a big crowd of people around him concerned and trying to minister to him. And through all these people came this sort of ratty guy in an overcoat who managed to weasel his way through and get right over him and said, hey man, I know it's not a good time, but, you know, we're really sick. Did you get the, you know? And he recited this himself. This actually happened, you know. But that kind of sums up the addict, you know, that thing where you're hell-bent, you're going, oh, it's terrible, yeah, about whatever, you know, some major global event. But you couldn't sort it out. It's good to be free of that. And I suppose in the confessional mode, a few years ago, I was working for a thing called Sporting Chance. I still see people from there. Tony Adams set it up for footballers, and you know it very well. And the guy, Colin Bland, the chief exec, he said, there's a box of cigars, Cuban cigars in the fridge there. He said, you can have them if you want, because no one's taking them. I knew nothing about Cuban cigars, what they cost or what they were like or anything like this. And I thought, well, one of my sponsees smokes cigars. I'll take them for him. I might as well try one while I'm at it, you know. So I tried this cigar, and then I thought, why should I give cigars to this man, you know, who doesn't even know I've got them? And it was amazing how that thing came up. I shared them with my sons, and at first I think it was horrible. I've never smoked a cigar. You know, you don't inhale them, it's horrible and all that. But I persevered with this cigar, and suddenly something changed, and I was on the step. Suddenly there was that grandiosity flooded in. I was like Castro or Churchill on the step, and I was thinking, I'll write my novel when I go. Stuff. Of course, all the novel and the drama and all the rest of it, that all dissipated when I went back in the house, you know. But that was a few years ago. But I was haunted by these cigars, and then I bought one off my own bat, and then this same sponsee, obviously he's in league with the devil. He turned up at my office in Clerkenwell. He said, "You didn't tell me there's a cigar shop round the corner at the bottom of Gray's Inn Road, you know." And so I went to the cigar shop, and since then I've been smoking the odd cigar. I smoked one today, like a couple a week, something like that. But it's so much like using. It's not like using. That would be dishonest. It's a kind of, it's not dissimilar, you know. And it's one of them where there isn't a jury in the land that would convict me, or an NA jury that would convict me. But it's just a reminder of the power of that thing. Even the consultant, the Italian consultant who I was immediately besotted with, she wouldn't recommend cigars. I don't remember her recommending them as an aid to heart. So there's still that stuff goes on occasionally, you know. But in fact, my wife discovered yesterday that when we got the Waitrose order, you can order cigars from Waitrose, so we got a couple of cigars. But I'm just owning that because probably I need to address it at some point. But that's it. It's really good to be. I'm conscious of my time and all that. But thanks for listening.
Thanks.